Welcome back to Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies, a podcast series where we talk to entrepreneurs from India's biggest tech startups to go back to that time when. That time when you needed allies, that time when you needed sound advice and good mentors, that time when you were looking for the right tech partners who can accelerate growth. I'm your host, Suchita Salwan, the founder and CEO of Little Black Book and a member of Forbes India and Forbes Asia 30 Under 30 lists. What started as my humble Tumblr blog is today India's largest online discovery platform with an objective to seek out, empower, and scale India's leading lifestyle businesses. On Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies, we discover how industry leaders respond to challenges in their entrepreneurial journeys. We also learn how initiatives like Dell for Startups empowers companies through innovative technology, strategic guidance, proven practical capabilities, and expert consulting assistance. In this episode, I have with me the power couple Tarun Dua, the Managing Director and CEO of E2E Networks, and Srishti Baweja, the COO and whole-time Director of E2E Networks. Established in 2009, E2E Networks is India's first company to introduce contract-less cloud computing solutions that helps businesses shift their operations to the cloud. The startup has transformed from its initial seed funding stage to achieving an EBITDA positive state and ultimately making its mark with an IPO. It has also played a pivotal role for several flourishing startups like Zomato, Cardeko, HealthCart, 1MG, and marquees like Jabong and Tapso. I talked to Tarun and Srishti about their experience as an early mover in the cloud sector, the business model that made E2E EBITDA positive, and the importance of building and maintaining solid stakeholder relationships. So Tarun, what sparked the realization that E2E Networks was the solution to India's slow broadband and expensive hosting challenges? Given your expertise as a hacker and a Linux guru, what drove you to focus on cloud computing over other technological avenues?
Okay, so no longer a hacker and a Linux guru. Like now I'm more like a glorified manager. So way back, the conversations in India used to be very different from the conversations of today's era. So the conversations used to be I remember I think in early 2000s we were talking about we should do like a new company and a new startup. So that was the era of outsourcing. So we will build a website and the website will do X, Y, Z. And the first question this particular person asked was but who is the customer of the website? Like who is ordering the website to be built? So the thought process was that you're building the website for a customer who is sitting in the US. The audience is over there and everything is US centric. So the natural corollary to that used to be so I'm going to host my website and okay, so you have taken a server in the US. No, it's like we are planning to do it in India. The question was why? So I had seen YouTube getting built in front of me. I happened to be working for an outsourcing company in a startup in Palo Alto. And I happened to attend one of the Linux user group meetings where YouTube guys were presenting basically how they built their architecture. So the realization was that there is ubiquitous infrastructure available in the US, and for $100 a month you can get a dedicated server. So dedicated servers and VPS servers used to be the precursor to the public cloud that we see today. And YouTube got built on practically one single company's servers. That company was called Server Beach, and that really impressed me. So once I came back to India, there were a lot of startup ideas in my mind, and then I worked for a startup in Pune. Then I worked for Yahoo. Then I consulted with a few large media companies who were building, incidentally, YouTube clones, and kind of my association along those lines again brought me closer to the fact that the infra is not there in India. People do not yet trust the infra in India, and it was only very large funded guys who were able to afford, mainly media companies and very large startups who were able to afford the infrastructure in India. And for small startups there was no option to pay $100, $200 or $300 and get compute on the tap, which they could return if the startup didn't work out. Typically there were 3-year contracts that you had to do with very large players, and there was nobody small dealing with small startups in that era.
Yeah.
So there was an opportunity that like for a startup, you have to be able to deal with someone small, someone who understands your problems, and someone who is committed to fix your problems. So uh, that was the problem we were trying to solve. That yes, like is there compute on the tap available through someone you are comfortable working with, like not like a large behemoth who could potentially crush you if you didn't pay them.
So that's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that. So Shrishti, being a CEO requires managing both internal teams and external partnerships. What, according to you, are the keys to building and maintaining strong relationships, especially with your key partners, suppliers, and other stakeholders?
Sunita, we have a very strong communication system at E2E in which different teams are always communicating with various stakeholders on a regular basis. Also, we have set a deadline of 24 hours for responding to any query received from a stakeholder. I think the strong communication system is a very key point. Also, I think this is a very basic point, but still, I always tell my team members to be very fair in our dealings and think of every relationship as a long-term one. And lastly, I think we do our work, we do it well.
Touche to that. You were also the CFO of E2E
Yes.
Networks before becoming its CEO. And, E2E has always been EBITDA positive right from its inception. What are the various factors in your business model that you think have played a role in achieving this financial milestone?
So, Chita, we always work backwards in the sense what is the customer willing to pay and what should be our cost. Let me give you a very simple example. So, like, customer doesn't want certain features in the tech that we are buying from a vendor. See, so we go back to the entire chain and we ask the vendor to not give us those features, and thereby we are able to reduce the cost. Also, we know our numbers very well from the very beginning, and we knew what can economies of scale do for us. And we kind of like bootstrapped in the beginning. We reinvested every rupee that we earned, and we were able to raise some capital, but it was not sufficient for the growth. And so we didn't have any room for failed experiments. We were very careful in that. And we prioritize our time and effort on the cost that actually mattered, like the recurring ones or the ones which are a larger chunk in terms of percentage of the revenue, rather than trying to control each and every cost, right? And we had a differentiated business model. So Tarun really likes to talk about it. Let us hear it from him.
So like we were very fond of saying that like okay, we only do like the top 10% things that our customers need, and we don't prioritize on like every single feature that the customers require. Like we encourage them that like if there is a solution out there on like another cloud that you can integrate with our cloud, like build like a hybrid or a multi-cloud solution with our cloud, as opposed to trying to do everything at one place. And internet is like a fully connected world, so it's not that there is a choice to be made that like if you are doing X at E2E Networks, you need to do Y and Z also at E2E Networks. So that allowed us for a very long time to kind of like prioritize on our product market fit and build those features which are the top revenue earning features for E2E, as well as like prioritizing the features that the customers really care about. So sometimes customers come up with a laundry list that like, okay, I need these 20 things. So then we ask them like, which are the ones that you're going to use today? So then typically the answer is that like whatever you wanted to use today, that is all available. Maybe like one thing is missing. So and like customers are really happy to hear that like, okay, what things are there on the roadmap? So that allowed us to push forward without like getting bogged down in like massive number of technology features that may not have contributed to our revenue, which the customers did not need today, and they were just a part of like a fancy checklist.
Absolutely. No, love the customer centricity. And Tarun, to you, as an early mover in the cloud industry, E2E Networks capitalized on setting up computer infrastructure at local data centers before government, promotion. What were the challenges you faced as an early entrant in the cloud market, and how did you overcome them?
So there were of course like a lot of challenges. So in terms that like when you would go and try to purchase services from the larger players, like they didn't understand like what we were trying to do, right? And there is obviously complete lack of understanding on the side of like basically local law enforcement, like basically like what is it that you do Today, of course, everyone understands what a cloud is and what the cloud service providers do. But typically, if it was our IP address showing up in connection with any sort of like investigation anywhere, then the primary thought process was like, who are these people and like what are these people doing, and like that brought in a lot of stress initially. So now, of course, like things have smoothened out over the years. So that was one part. The other part was that like the entire infrastructure was not geared towards like the four nines of reliability. Like typically, it was a very what you call mindset of India prided itself on, like matlab, kind of like a very jugaad mindset. So that has kind of like completely changed. So earlier in the market, you could find like one backend provider who really understood the requirements. Today, of course, this industry, entire data center industry has grown. And what was understood by one player is now understood by like 100 odd players as to what is the right thing to do. So we have had things like in the middle of the day, suddenly like your entire infrastructure is down for like 30 seconds. And then we understood that like there were people in our backend providers, like this was like again very way back, like we're talking about like a decade or 12 years earlier. So somebody went ahead and like made some configuration change on a backend router and rebooted it. So things like change management processes and kind of like getting in a sign-in from all the stakeholders before you do changes into production infrastructure, those were not very well understood amongst like even very large providers at that point of time. And like things used to happen and they were explained to us post facto. So then we started building those things into our relationships with our backend providers, where we said that like, okay, like if we come in, we are obviously bringing in a lot of volume of work for you, and you have to do things in a certain way. And those things obviously drastically changed like once some very large compute players, cloud computing players started coming into India. So then the entire ecosystem started understanding the requirements like much more, and they became very standardized. But in that era, like before the hyperscalers were there in India, like it was E2E and the tech startups, mostly unicorns were born on E2E. So we were the only ones who knew how to do web scale. And kind of like we were the pioneers in like helping people scale up from kind of like very small size to millions of daily active users on their web properties.
That sounds incredible. And, what a joy it must have been for you to see so much of your early startup being built on E2E. So congratulations to you on that. What role has Dell played in your tech startup over the years, and how has it supported you?
So Dell has been very open to customize to our requirements. Like as Srishti mentioned that like we are very, very focused on the value being delivered. Like we don't like things to be bundled that are not like required by our infrastructure and not required by our customers. So typically like any vendor who is working with like a local hyperscaler like us has to be able to provide services similar to the ones that they provide to like the bigger hyperscalers. And although we are still small and we were small, like Dell has been quite forthcoming in terms of helping us in terms of customizing what they will provide to us, and that has been helpful.
That's lovely to hear. It's amazing to know how E2E Networks Limited uses technology to help businesses shift their operations to the cloud and manage them, and how Dell has been a part in this incredible journey of making this possible, especially for small and medium businesses. Now, apart from offering trustworthy digital solutions, Dell for Startups helps companies reach their goals and defines new routes for their success. They help startups in India to accelerate their digital journey and solve some of the biggest challenges in the country, keeping Dell's core purpose in the forefront, creating technologies that drive human progress. We now head back to Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies to hear from Tarun Dua and Srishti Baweja about the distinctive factors that set India apart from other countries in the realm of cloud infrastructure, the journey of guiding E2E from its seed funding phase to its successful IPO debut, and what it is like to work together with their spouse. So Tarun, you also mentioned that in India, people prefer a partner who can handle cloud-native ways of doing things without a massive learning curve. How does this differ in other countries, and what are the unique challenges and advantages that you see while catering to India's very unique, Jugadu needs?
Sure. So, tech has become far more widespread today, but it was not always the case. So, India was like a very uh, Windows point and click centered kind of a country, not like a very driven by tech communities. Tech communities used to be like a very overall a much smaller piece in India compared to the West. So in the West, if somebody was providing services, like the expectation was that like the customer self services themselves and the customer has a certain technical skill set level, and there was very clear demarcation between what the customer is doing and what a service provider is doing. So India was like massively a you do it for me country. So where the customer expects like a lot of hand holding and the customer expects the provider to solve a lot of problems. And we have taken a lot of those learnings and incorporated those into our self-service product. And also we have written documentation to kind of like support that self-service product. So like the learnings have been incorporated today. And of course, the market also has become much more mature, and the technologists in India also have like grown in terms of like raw numbers and understanding of the depth of the tech stack. So people have started seeing the kind of problems being solved on the infrastructure side on a day-to-day basis. And today the customers are also much more tech savvy than they were like something like 12, 14 years back.
No, absolutely. The landscape's changed considerably. So, Srishti, let me bring you in. Taking E2E Networks public through an IPO entails calculated risks and the demanding task of managing paperwork outside, along with daily operations. What drove your decision to explore the public investment market, and how did you and your team effectively handle this duopoly of responsibility of, doing the day-to-day, but also ensuring that your IPO is a success?
Suchita, it was a long process. So I think we started in November 2017 and we did the IPO in May 2018. So it took almost around 6 months. We had to get a merchant banker on board. We had to get the due diligence done, find investors, work on the issue price. It was a very long process. And frankly, we needed money at that time for growth, and which we were not able to raise from the VCs. That is why we decided to explore the IPO route. And handling the dual responsibility, I would say we did it with a lot of dedication and hard work.
And what were the key lessons that you learned from this experience? I'm sure it would have been an insane learning curve for you.
So I think the biggest learning has been that the issue price has to be decided very carefully. Like the company, the merchant banker, and the investors, they have to like get together and decide on the issue price. So you have to leave something on the table for investors, for them to be able to make money. And also, I think I would say that IPO is a very huge one-time event. So it has to be handled very carefully and cost efficiently. You cannot say like it's a one-time event, so I can splurge. You have to it's a very fine balance between what you can do internally and for which services you need consultants from outside.
Absolutely. So the both of you are, obviously a couple that's been working together for almost a decade. How do you manage the balance in between your personal and your professional life?
I would start first. So it was very difficult in the beginning. We were very immature and young, and we have had our share of fights and arguments. But I think over a period of time, both of us have evolved professionally and personally. We have very clear demarcation of responsibilities. We have very different skill sets. And we try to not bring the office work home and vice versa, but practically it's not always possible. Also, we kind of like joke around and say that we have a company to run and almost teenager daughter to raise. So we have no option like but to stick to each other.
That's optimistic. Tarun, what's your take?
So on similar lines, basically. So both running a startup and raising a kid are very hard jobs, and doing them together creates that shared sense of responsibility, and kind of like you're both suffering from the same things. You're both exhilarated by the same things. So kind of like it tends to work out.
Lovely, that's great to hear. And to the both of you, looking ahead, what role do you envision E2E Networks playing in India's rapidly evolving technology landscape, particularly in the areas of AI and machine learning?
I'll give a very short answer here. I see it as a very big part of the innovation landscape of India.
Tarun, and you?
So we were like one of the early movers. Now we always work with like innovative startups, and basically like we have learned a lot from our customers. Most of who have been like a kind of like fast moving innovative startups, and the first demands of like the AI ML focused GPUs actually came from some of our startup customers, and we began doing that stuff like in way back in 2018. Started to understand like what is it that when people are talking about machine learning, deep learning, what does that mean? And kind of like when COVID hit, I think like we started hitting like a perfect wave of getting customers. So that creates a virtuous cycle. So you learned something new from your customers, you started doing it. Then your customers come up with the problems of like what they are facing in terms of what they're trying to execute. Then again you learn from them, then you build some of those features. So it has been like we have seen this opportunity early on. We have kind of like tried to retarget as a small company, retarget like most of our resources towards solutions to these problems, and kind of like double down on basically the future of higher education research and AI and machine learning and deep learning in India. And we've been a part of the ecosystem everywhere with tie-ups with with like people like NASCOM and the Telangana AI Mission and K-Tech Center of Excellence, and we work with like a lot of IITs, triple IITs, and many other higher education research institutions. We worked with a lot of innovative startups who are working on computer vision, including in the area of like medical imaging. So that has helped us being kind of like be very centrally located amongst people who are innovating. So like in the personal world, we say like you become who you interact with. Like so, the top 10 people you are
Yeah.
interacting with, their personality gets embedded onto you. So it's very similar in terms with for companies. So if as a company we have been working with innovators and researchers, so some of that has rubbed off on us and kind of like it has changed our DNA for good.
Lovely. If two last questions from me, Srishti, if we could begin with you. What's the one thing that you're super excited about with respect to, E2E's new launches or new innovations in the next couple of months or years, which you can share with our listeners?
I'm very excited about the AI, ML, and DL workloads. I see lots of opportunity there, and E2E being a part of that, like taking a chunk of that opportunity, I think that's what excites me a lot.
And Tarun, what about you?
So same thing. So
Same answer. Yes, I can see the unison in between personal and professional lives happening over here very closely. Just last question, and Tarun, maybe we begin with you. What's the one advice that you'd give to fellow founders about building a business?
see, I think like one is of course like the couple of things that like the investor ecosystem has taught us is basically like work in markets which have a very large total addressable market. So work in a large TAM market, and obviously the product market fit has to come in, which means that like be at the center of where the problems, the most interesting problems are that you need to solve. And third and most important, I think, which Srishti has really brought to the table at E2E is to kind of like track all the key metrics which tell you about the health of the business. And I think like for the metrics, you need to cut down the cycle time. So essentially, we used to have like a lot of metrics which were yearly in nature. There were a few people in the company who used to talk about, okay, we will do something in 6 months, 9 months. This is on a 12-month roadmap. So kind of like we started to cut down on the cycle time, and like most of our metrics today are either weekly or monthly, and at most quarterly. But we do not look far beyond like say a 4-month cycle from a metrics perspective. So we don't try to predict, but we try to react with, of course, like a broad roadmap in being in place.
That's fascinating. Srishti, what about you?
I think being cash flow positive is a very important point. Even if you have capital, then also you need to have a short-term plan to be able to being cash flow positive, and like you cannot like burn and burn and burn. So that is the one thing that we are very, very, very sure in the beginning, and we have like carried it till like in the past like 12 years. And that is the one advice.
On that truthful and wonderful note, thank you so much to both of you, Tarun and Srishti, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we're very excited for what's ahead for E2E Networks. All the very best from all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Suchita.
A big thank you to Tarun Dua and Srishti Baweja, the formidable duo driving E2E Networks, for being on Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies. If you're an entrepreneur that's forging your path with your dreams, Dell for Startups can help you in your digital journey and transformation. For more details, check out the links in the episode description.